Welcome back to How to Craft Fair. This is the 6th episode in the member Q&A series where I take a look at questions submitted by channel members who are oftentimes craft fair vendors, sometimes craft fair organizers, and I do my best to answer their question specifically, but also in a general sense so that it hopefully helps everybody out who's viewing this. So let's take a look at the set of questions in this episode. All right, so the first two questions are from Eliana, and her first is, when you're not approved to participate in a craft fair, what can a vendor do to improve their rate of acceptance? So forgive me in advance, but I have to look down at my notes quite a bit because I take a whole bunch of notes for these videos and just got to look down and check them. So the first thing I'm going to mention is that what she's referring to is likely a juried craft fair. Now, if you're not familiar with what a juried event is, it's basically when you have to apply to participate as a vendor, and the organizers, or sometimes it's volunteers who make this decision. Somebody is making a decision on who gets accepted and who does not get accepted to participate in the event. Okay, so that's called the jury process. Now, what are some things that a vendor can do to increase their chances of getting into a juried event? So one of the first things that you can do is to strengthen your following online. I know that there's no magic overnight solution to accomplish this, but you should try to build your following over time online. My advice is to make high quality posts and content, but to also engage with others online. This is basically just going to solidify those connections online, and there's investment there. So you're going to be invested in the person and they'll be invested back with you. And you're not going to see those fluctuations in your following online. Okay. So sometimes people will, get followers in a way that's not as credible or authentic, and those followers aren't as likely to stick around long term. Okay. So when you actually communicate with your followers and you develop something that's real, then there's something there. Okay. And there's something worth sticking around for. So this goes both ways. The more you put in, the more you're going to get back, basically. So in a general sense, some vendors, they make posts, but then they kind of just leave it up to fate. Okay, so that's kind of what that's boiling down to, is you want to just go further than making the post or making the content. Unfortunately, this work is not done when a vendor clicks the post button. Okay, so when you go to post that content, don't consider it done there. So if people drop comments on your post, just be sure to respond to all those comments and take real consideration into what people are saying to you. Okay, so that's going to help, again, establish that credibility and that real connection with other people. So you don't want to count on going viral to get your followers. Okay, for most of us, basically all of us, it's going to take a grind. All right, so like a daily grind, rolling up the sleeves and really kind of digging in there every day. So I know it's tough. I know it's a dedication of time, which for just about all of us is our most valuable resource that we have. But if you want to grow your following, that's the kind of effort it's going to take. Okay, so chip away at it a little bit every day. Try not to get overwhelmed by it. So don't say, okay, this day I'm going to put in like 3 or 4 hours. Just, work at it a little bit every day. Don't consider it this daunting thing, because then, you're going to start flirting with burnout, and that's something that you don't want to get into. So that is my first suggestion with establishing yourself as a credible vendor, is strengthening that following online. All right, so another tip I have is to showcase your creations at a very high level. So one thing that you can do is consider hiring a photographer with experience in product or brand photography so that you can show off your creative works in a professional manner. A lot of us have smartphones now, and sometimes portrait mode will look really good on a phone. So one thing that you can consider doing if you want to try to DIY this is to get a light box. Now, light boxes are very, very affordable. It's basically just a little cube that you can set up, and there's an LED light at the top, and it disperses light really nicely inside the box. So if you have smaller works, for instance, all you jewelry vendors or, woodworkers that make something small like turned pens that can be kind of nice in here. Some things will show really, really well in here. One thing that you can pair a light box with on Amazon is a little rotating display. So you can find these on Amazon for literally like, I don't know, $10. They're very, very inexpensive. And again, if you can set your item on the rotating display, then you would go ahead and make a video with it. And this will show the product at all angles inside the light box. And that can look really, really nice too. So what I'm saying here is basically just try to put some serious effort into the way that you're showing off your works. Okay, you've put a lot of time and effort into creating your items, but then how are you showing them to potential shoppers? Okay, so that's one thing that you can do, not only just to make a better connection between you and potential shoppers, but again, circling back to the juried events, it is going to give you a better shot getting into more premier events because you are showcasing your works in a very professional manner. All right, so another thing that you can do to establish your credibility to a jury is to ensure that your customer satisfaction reviews are up to date. So if you have this posted on social media, or if you direct people to a website for this, even if you get them like through text from people, go ahead and put that on your website and then put the quote as the person's name. Of course, ask permission if it's okay to, post on your website their quote. But the more of these that you can start to build up, again, the more credible that you're going to become and look as a vendor. Okay. So these are just some of the things that you can do to, again, establish that credibility. Okay. Because that's really the most important thing when it comes to a craft fair jury is they want to be proud of every single vendor that's at their event. Okay. And there's a certain threshold that they're looking for with, they want a vendor with a certain amount of followers, or they want to just have a professional appearance. Sometimes you can, if you have participated in quite a few events, you can kind of lean on that experience, be like, hey, I've done over 50 craft fairs or whatever it might be. So sometimes just sheer experience is also a plus side that you can boast about to the jury. Okay. So just come prepared. That's basically what I'm trying to get at is you just want to come in prepared and lay everything out. All right. So you don't want to just apply for a juried event in a rash manner. You want to go into this very well organized. All right, so let's go on to question 2 from Eliana, and it is it now common for organizers to check how many followers you have to see how worthy you are for their event? And this is basically just kind of piggybacking off the last question. And yes, absolutely, especially, again, at the formal juried events. Some organizers aren't super formal about their jury or acceptance process. Some might make a decision rather quickly if they can see that you have a huge following or a lack of a following at all. That could also trigger a decision. So this does indeed carry some weight in the vendor selection process. Keep in mind that organizers want to get the word out about their show. So if they have a choice between selecting a vendor for their event who has 100 social media followers, or a different vendor has 10,000 social media followers, take a guess who they're going to pick for their event. Okay. And you hate to boil it down to things like this. All right. But if you look at it from the organizer's perspective, again, they are trying to spread the word about their show. And if one vendor has a massive reach compared to a different vendor, that does give them a leg up. I mean, you have to be realistic about it. Okay. So it is unfortunate that sometimes it does come down to this aspect. I mean, you could have the most tremendous artwork out there, but sometimes it does. These types of things like social media followers can weigh into the decision. All right. So yes, I would say that it is common for this to play a factor. So again, just circling back to that first point we talked earlier, just try to chip away at it every day. Okay. And every day that you can build, that's just, more of a presence that you have and more credibility that you have as a vendor. Okay, now we're going to go to a couple of questions from Molly. So Molly is a new channel member. By the way, if you're interested in becoming a channel member, there should be a button that says join below. And if you click on it, it'll just give you a whole big description of what's all included with channel memberships. It's basically like a super subscription. You get a lot of great perks. You get to participate in these Q&As, and there's a lot of different benefits besides that. So check it out if you're interested. Molly, thanks again for submitting a couple questions. Here is the first one. She asks, can you provide some tips on how to organize a working space at home, ideally for vendors who crochet? Okay, so this is a great question. Something that we haven't really talked about too much in the past is like that in-home workspace. So I just kind of jotted down a few different notes here. One thing that you can do is to separate your areas, if possible, between what always stays home and then what comes and goes with you to events. This will make the loading up for events much easier, and you'll be less likely to forget something. So that's also another nice perk. It will also be helpful to not always have your home workspace in a constant state of disarray by having items entering and leaving before and after every event. Okay, so this just kind of boils down to general organization. So again, try to keep these areas separate if you can. Now, not everybody has a big workspace, but do the best that you can with it, because when you get home and you want to work on stuff, you don't want to have a bunch of stuff in front of you that is not even going to help you in that general moment. Okay, so try to keep these things separate, and that will definitely benefit you. All right, so diving in a little bit more specifically now on crochet, one thing that you can do is to organize your fabrics by color if you haven't already. Then you could even consider taking it a step further and organizing by the type of fabric or material. So just these little steps can help to, I don't want to say declutter, but definitely de-stress, and it'll help you to find things easier. And when you're putting things away, obviously that'll keep that process easier too. So we talked a little bit about keeping areas separate for different purposes, but then now you can also streamline your workspace at home. Okay, so have a little separate area for everything. So that's kind of like my next point, is to make sure that you have a dedicated space for all the essentials. So your hooks, the thread, the yarn. If you use any kind of books or guides when you crochet, so some people have like patterns or steps that they'll follow, keep all those in a separate section too. So have a dedicated space for everything. And then that way, again, you know, you're talking about less clutter and just less like chaos and disarray. And another thing that you can do is to remove all necessary clutter. So if you aren't using something, get rid of it, either entirely or relocate it out of your workspace and move it to maybe storage in the basement or the garage, or just away from the area that you've tried to be productive in. Okay, so keep that in the back of your mind, that you should have a space that's kind of guarded, and don't allow stuff that isn't essential to that space to enter it. Okay, so imagine like a, you know, invisible wall or whatever around this workspace. Keep everything that's essential out of there, so that when you're in the workspace, all that you have is all that you need. Okay, so that's really important. I guess basically what I'm trying to say is that tidiness and organization is key to all of this. So I know those tips were, you know, fairly general, maybe not super specific towards crochet, but hopefully they can help you out. It's basically just a mindset. You know, we all have a certain amount of space that we can work with. And it's just a matter of protecting that space and keeping it established for its original purpose. All right, so the second question is, as a vendor, am I able to crochet during a craft fair in a way that might be considered a demonstration? It helps from an anxiety standpoint. So I want to touch on that last part first. Okay, so for craft fair vendors, this is a very real thing. Sometimes it's just overwhelming to be at a craft fair, especially when you're fairly new to it. Okay, if you've done this for like 10 or 15 years, you know, maybe you're used to all the commotion and all that stuff, but honestly, even after that time, it can still kind of shake people. So to have something to do, I can definitely understand that. Okay, but at the same time, even considering all that, I would advise against this. if you are alone as a vendor with no help. Okay, so that's kind of like the big asterisk at the end of the sentence here. Now, if you have a helper, this is a totally different story. Okay, so it's going to give you opportunities to maybe take some of that like burden off of you, where you can do your demonstration and all that stuff and kind of do your thing and be comfortable, but still have somebody there to be able to interact with shoppers and all that. But at the same time, I'm not going to lie to you, some shoppers, they will be turned off by having the vendor have their attention on something other than them as the shopper. Okay, so just straight up, I know it's kind of blunt or whatever, but some shoppers are going to feel this way. Okay, that's a big perk. A craft fair for shoppers, big part of the excitement is to be able to meet the vendors and interact with the vendor and the artist and all that. And if you take that element away, well, then that's kind of just removing a really big perk of the craft fair for a shopper. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind, that it's a little bit of a give and take and a little sacrifice there. And remember, a craft fair is about 6 hours on average. Now, that's the only chance that you've got to make an in-person impression on shoppers. Okay, so you got to try to make it count. So it's tough. I can certainly understand you. When I organized craft fairs the night before, I was like borderline sick to my stomach. I mean, seriously, even years and years into it, it's just, you still get like the shakes and you still get nervous about, I just want to put my best foot forward, and there's like so much preparation, whether you're an organizer or you're a vendor, there's so much preparation that goes into a show. And when it finally comes around, you just want to feel good about it. Okay. And like I said, the time that you have at the craft fair, there's only a certain amount of time there, and you just got to try to make it count. Okay. So I can understand where you're coming from with the anxiety. Okay. But if you are absolutely dead set on doing this, the demonstration and working on your art during the show, then I would highly recommend that you always bring a helper. Okay. Because you just want to have at least someone there to be giving attention to the shoppers at all times. Okay, so keep that in mind. That's all the questions that we have for this particular Q&A video. So we only had 4 questions. We only had 2 channel members submit questions. Guys, this is your chance to submit questions. So just be sure to get them in if you want anything answered. No pressure, but feel free. And viewers, I hope that you got a lot out of this too. So if you enjoyed the video and learned something from the content today, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps the channel more than I can even explain, but I very much appreciate it. So with that being said, thank you for watching and have yourself a great day.